Hey, folks, welcome to another edition of Broken Brains with your host, Bruce Parkman, sponsored by the Mac Parkman Foundation, where we look at the issue of repetitive brain trauma in two forms: repetitive head impacts from contact sports and repetitive blast exposure for our military veterans, and what these conditions are doing to the mental health and brains of our athletes, kids, and veterans. And why is this important? It's because this is not trained in our nursing, psychological, or medical communities. So nobody's aware of the correlation between repetitive head impacts, repetitive blast exposure, mental illness. So our men and women are mistreated, misdiagnosed, and we have what is now the largest preventable epidemic of mental health in this country. That's why we do this podcast, so that you're informed. Today's guest, another outstanding guest. I don't know where my producer finds these folks, man. This is amazing. Dr. Ben Askins, or Ben Doc Askins, is a physician associate, executive coach, author, and global war and terrorism veteran with advanced training in neuropsychiatry, genomics, and wilderness medicine. With nearly 2 decades of experience in the military and civilian settings, he specializes in integrative health, psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, and human performance. Ben is MAPS certified in MDMA-assisted psychotherapy and trained in performance neuroscience through the Flow Research Collective. A National Outdoor Leadership School alumnus and wilderness medicine educator, he is known for his creative voice, evidence-based approach, and passion for helping others optimize their health, mindset, and purpose. Mr. Askins, welcome to the show, sir.
Wow, that's a hell of an intro. I don't know if I can live up to all of that.
Thanks
Stacked
for
up
working
like
on
that.
it. I wrote it up on the way to work this morning, man. All good.
That's kind of you. I appreciate it. Sounds like a
No, man, thanks for
hagiography.
coming on
Yeah.
board. Yeah, it's real
Yeah.
exciting to have you here. So,
My pleasure to be here. Absolutely.
So tell us, how did you get here? I mean, what was your journey? Obviously, you got some military service behind you.
Yeah, my dad was a Vietnam vet. His dad was a World War II vet. There's kind of a long family tradition of raising the right hand and showing up whenever asked to by old Uncle Sam. And I was a bit of a late bloomer in that regard. I got to 27 years old and was like, oh man, they're going to start like age wavering people. If I don't sign up and go, it's going to be too late. So I enlisted. I already had a bachelor's degree and a whole brain, right? Like brain development, you get your whole prefrontal cortex around 25 or 26.
Yep, you hit it back.
Usually
Very
they
good.
trick people into joining the military at 17 or 18 because they don't have all of the risk assessment levels of the brain developed yet. They're like, oh yeah, sounds like fun. I get paid to blow things up and do exercise and get screamed at. That's
Where do I sign?
A person with only half a brain's idea of a good time, but I had a whole brain and still decided to go ahead and sign up, if that gives you any kind of an idea about how good I am at decision making with major life choices. But yeah, enlisted at 27 as a 68 whiskey, a combat medic. I was already married and couldn't convince my wife that the full-time military was a lifestyle that we could survive together. So I signed up for the 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks every summer, Army National Guard version of all of that stuff, which, anybody who joined the Guard during the GWAT will tell you was an absolute lie. I wound up disappearing for years at a time along the way there, including one trip to Iraq with a military police company out of the Kentucky Army National Guard. And came back from that, used my GI Bill to get a Master of Divinity degree because I like to ask big questions that nobody really knows the answers to, but are a lot of fun to have conversations about. And then was okay enough as a combat medic that they selected me to go to the Inter-Service Physician Assistant program through the military, which is just one of the best kept professional secrets in the military at this point. Like my civilian counterparts go upwards of $250,000 into debt to become PAs. And I got paid staff sergeant pay to go to school, came out without any debt and, made a living in the meantime. Got done with PA school and rolled straight into a civilian career in psychiatry, which was where I first kind of dipped my toe into the psychedelic field, doing ketamine-assisted therapy in an outpatient psychiatry practice. Right around the time that the COVID pandemic was shutting down the planet. So it was a weird time to try to manage some acutely suicidal patients that you might normally want to hospitalize. We were looking at avoiding sending people into the hospital. So I wound up doing a bit of baptism by fire there, doing suicide intervention therapy with ketamine. And then got pulled into another deployment over just to Kosovo in 2022 with the Kentucky National Guard's Infantry Battalion as their battalion surgeon. Came back from that 2 months later. I was in the MAPS training to do MDMA-assisted therapy there, and have seen the way that some of those medicines work for the particular tribe that we're a part of. So that led to writing a couple of books and starting a podcast and doing some advocacy work in the political arena to just try to get people's attention about things that seem to work for recalcitrant, difficult problems like brain health and mental health in general. That'd be the kind of the long and the short version, maybe.
Oh, it's amazing
how I got here today.
What'd you do this summer? Right, I get the book report when you got back to school. No, I mean that's a fascinating journey, sir, and thank you for your service. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's it just begs the question: is why do these psychedelic assisted therapies continue to be ignored? And where does this where does this end? I mean, because you've seen both sides of it. You've seen the civilian world. I can't even imagine what it was like during COVID to try and manage manage patients. What was the biggest challenge? I mean, especially since if you're going to do integrative therapy, you got to kind of have somebody else in the room, right? I mean, were you able to do any telehealth stuff, or how did you solve for that?
Yeah, for sure. We had to pivot from in-person to telehealth at that time. I got my medical license in February of 2020. And if you look at the timeline, March of 2020 was when they started the whole 2 weeks to flatten the curve idea of keeping everybody locked up tight inside. So we had to pivot to telehealth. We had a team-based approach. I wasn't, flying solo on this. I had a mentor who's an excellent physician. And we all just kind of hung tight together, did a lot of case reviews, making sure we were paying close attention to what was going on with each patient. And then it's a lot like you would imagine casualty collection point triage sorts of stuff winds up working. You just start with the biggest problem that you think you can get some leverage on, and you do that just like they taught us to do as medics. At times it felt a little bit metaphorically like some kind of Hacksaw Ridge sort of scenario where it's like you just pick one up, you carry them to the edge, you hand them off to somebody else. Do I have any energy left? Sure. Let's go back and get another one. And you just keep going until either you can't anymore or somebody else picks up and you get a little help along the way.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because when we talk about caretakers or the integrative side of people, I talk to a lot of folks in the psychedelic space that when you're under psychedelic therapy, you unload a lot of stuff. And some people like myself prefer to undergo these therapies by themselves. Others, go through it with a counselor or a therapist or a guide, right?
For sure.
And they absorb a lot of negative stuff, right? I mean, people are unloading some really, really deep and often very dark stuff. And so now we're finding out that the mental wellness of our caregiver population is almost as impacted by the people that they see, because over the years of absorbing this energy that comes out of these patients, right? I mean, and I continuously counsel them to kind of keep awareness. Do you recognize that as an issue with the space as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the terms that get used for it are things like compassion fatigue, which seems like an understatement to me in terms of like my own experience of it. It just seems to cut to the core of who we are. Like I think of life as having kind of several different orders of meaning to it. And yeah, there are, however you want to think of them, they're sort of intangible or difficult to measure emotional costs that are paid by people who are just sitting in the room, holding the space and having the conversation in a way that maintains the level of seriousness and sobriety necessary for someone who is, working through the absolute worst experiences of their entire lives to try to get to the other side of healing that. There's an energy transfer that takes place that we haven't done the kind of research around necessary to understand really well. Like I could share a story with you around that if that's, interesting to you. I wrote a book back in 2023 about, it was an ambitious project to undertake. I decided to write my own autobiography, but make it a simulator for what it might be like to experience psychedelic therapy. So it's kind of an odd book. It's a bit different than just, hey, I went to these places at these times and did these things like the average autobiography might be. It's a little bit weirder and plays around a little bit more philosophically, but there's an anti-suicide chapter near the end of the book. And I went to the MAPS Psychedelic Science Conference and had a booth there where I was kind of repping the book and playing this fun little game with people where I'd give away free copies of the book if you'd pull a number out of this hat and sit down in this chair in the booth and read whatever chapter of the book you pulled the number out for, and then just tell me what you thought of the chapter. If you hated it, if you loved it, whatever, price of admission, free book is read a chapter.
That's
and over and over again. It was fun, right? It's a little psychedelic game we play, and over and over again, people started pulling out that anti-suicide chapter and then wanting to kind of open up and share with me about thoughts that they'd been having recently or loved ones that they had been, thinking deeply about who are struggling with whether or not they still want to be here or still have that, ability to make meaning for themselves or whatever it might be. So I spent the day, I was wearing like a Deadpool costume as like a cosplay sort of joke sort of thing. Like it was a fun convention center, more like a party with some nerdy researchers sort of vibe. And that was kind of how I was drawing attention was, cosplaying as Deadpool. So I'm here in this Deadpool costume doing impromptu like suicide intervention therapy in a booth in a convention center in Denver. Super unexpected. And after about the fourth or fifth time doing that on the fly, somebody just like making eye contact with me and they're crying and wanting to talk through some of these things, and then like getting on Psychology Today and helping them make an appointment with a therapist in their hometown, just like really trying to take care of these folks. I got to like the middle of the afternoon and was like, I feel like I have to cry. And it was this like just energy had built up throughout the day of like hearing these people's stories. And I didn't want to do that in public, standing there in this
not in a Deadpool
center,
costume,
right?
That would be anti-hero.
Right. Yeah, it's just ridiculous, right? The book's called The Anti-Hero's Journey. They can't think of anything more anti-heroic than like just having an emotional breakdown right there in front of everybody. There's a mushroom guy over here and a neurofeedback guy over here, and there's this 240-pound, veteran standing here weeping uncontrollably. It's not going to work. So I was like, shit, I got to get out of here. So I took off running to my hotel room in this Deadpool costume, right? There's like homeless guys on the street trying to stop me. I'm like throwing them all my money out of my wallet. Just get out of my way. Get the hell out of the way. I got to go. And I get to the hotel and two of my buddies are in the hotel lobby and they're like, hey, what? You don't want to stop and talk to us? So I'm yelling across this hotel lobby, no, I got to shit real bad. I got to get to the room because it seemed less embarrassing to yell, I got to take a shit than I got to go cry.
I got to go bawl my eyes out.
As a grown man or whatever. But I got to my hotel room and I just had this crazy experience of like just crying and crying and crying for these other people. I had whatever their story was put on me, and it felt like if I didn't do something with that energy, if I just stuffed it down and suppressed it like I'd been taught since I was a little boy to do, that it was somehow going to turn into like, I don't know, a prostate tumor or something that was going to try to kill me. So I just cried and cried and cried, and then hearing the sound of my own crying sounded kind of funny, and it started to make me laugh, and I started like laughing. So I was just swinging back and forth on this energetic pole from like weeping to laughing. Like, is this really happening? What's going on? And it was just this crazy energy that had to get moved through my body. And then I was okay. And I don't think we get the opportunity to like do that sort of thing or recognize what's happening there as caregivers to allow ourselves the space to just feel the emotions that are created by sharing other people's emotions with them. I think if we all did that a bit more often, we might be able to endure it a bit longer. But it certainly does fill up to a certain point. You know, there's a famous book by David Hackworth. His biography was about
Love David
face,
Hackworth, man.
right? And yeah, it's just an amazing, you know, perfect attendance record, World War II, Korea and Vietnam,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you know, a
bad, dude.
journalist on the front lines afterward. And he uses this analogy of having a jar of water, and whenever
Yeah.
the jar gets full, there's
Bottle
just
full.
nothing you're going to do to allow the water to get out of that other than evaporation. You can't pour it out. You can't do anything about it. And if a guy's jar gets full, you're just going to have to wait and see if it ever gets unfull again. I think there's things we could do prior to having a full jar that may allow us to kind of bleed some of that stuff out along the lines of just doing all the healthy things, but especially allowing yourself the room and the space and the time to process whatever emotions you feel as a caregiver, I think is a bedrock cornerstone of that. A long way of getting around to answering your question there.
No, because this is one of the things I'd like the audience to understand is that, you know, we're having huge problems in, you know, our law enforcement community with police officers that are assigned to pedophile and child sex and trafficking cases because of the stuff they have to look at. And over time, man, I mean, the self-harm rates are huge. And so we are working with and helping out programs that bring these cops out for a week or so and just get them to your set, right? You know, police officers, military, NFL, professional football players, all the same people, right? Can't cry,
Sure.
can't, you know, you
For
suck
sure.
it all up. You make the, you know, the deep, dark humor, you know, jokes, but whatever, but you do not cry. And so, you know, we're trying to understand is that like some of the stuff that you're talking about here with psychedelic assisted therapy is awesome. Man, I've been through a lot of it. I've known a lot of people that have been through it. And I honestly believe myself is that you cannot get anywhere faster from a spiritual perspective, a self-healing perspective than you can when you crack yourself open with these medicines. And I think it's, you know, it's been an amazing transformation in my personal life. But I wanted to bring that up because, you know, you're a caretaker and then want to kind of, you know, move over a little bit about these psychedelics, right? And a lot of people ask me, what's it like to be on ketamine? What's it like to do MDMA or psilocybin? I've done ayahuasca. I just came through ibogaine, more in a research perspective, you know, spiritual. I wanted to do the spiritual, but I want to be able to walk the walk. When I talk about these things, because I've been there, all right? You know, and so, but if you could, as a practitioner, talk a little bit about our audience, because ketamine is, well, it's been FDA approved off and on. The military uses it. And I think it's a great, I call it a gateway. It's the psychedelic gateway for me, right? So everybody should start with ketamine because it is fundamentally, you know, eye-opening from the experience perspective and from, you know, the ability to unload and to cry and to feel and to emote and all that. So can you talk to the audience a little bit about, you know, ketamine and MDA, man? I mean, what's, you know, the benefits of, what's the experience like? You know, because we have a lot of questions about, hey, I really want to improve myself, but where do I start? And I think that, you know, beyond if, you know, the brain damage side of things we'll talk about a little bit here is that these medicines can absolutely put you on a fast path to self-healing.
Yeah, absolutely. What a fantastic question. Before I answer it, I want to mention something that you made me think of with respect to kind of the law enforcement folks that are dealing with heavy caseloads there, and just the wear and tear on living that lifestyle. I think we're living in a time where the tide is turning to some extent in the public conversation around mental health. Like, you know, my dad, as a Vietnam veteran, you know, crying was seen as weakness, and that was the expectation in that generation, right? Was that wasn't something that you were going to do, was process emotion ever. period, much less publicly.
Ever.
But we've got, yeah, right? We're just going to stuff it down and we're going to die with it inside us. And that's fine.
It might
That's what
kill
we've
you,
done.
but you're not
For my father and his
letting it out.
father. Right, exactly. His father's father before him did that or whatever. Yeah, they all died at like 50, Dad. Like, that doesn't
They
work.
did.
Or whatever, you know, right?
My dad died at 44 from anger, cigarettes, and alcohol. I'm like, really?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I got up this morning and looked at my Instagram, and I have a really good friend / colleague named Dr. Andrew Fisher, who is a legend in the military medicine community, like helped design the Ranger fresh whole blood transfusion protocols back when he was a Ranger PA. Now he's a trauma surgeon down in New Mexico or Texas somewhere. His handle's Trauma Daddy, just a living legend. Helped write a lot of the TC3 protocols that we use in pre-hospital care in the military. You know, he was a Ranger for a long time. And his post was, I have depression, and it's a selfie of this is what depression looks like. And he's just, he's pulling away from his fellowship as a trauma surgeon to get help. And that's actually courage. That's actually strength. That's not weakness. And whenever guys like him and, a whole host of other examples out there, that's just the freshest one for me because I know him and I saw it this morning, but that it is courageous to process the entirety of your experience as a human being rather than denying and suppressing and ignoring some of those sorts of things. So we're lucky as, to be alive at this particular time, whenever the mindset is changing, not just individually, but at a collective level, to where you can be fully yourself and get the opportunity to recover in ways that just wasn't available to previous generations, at least here in America, where the expectations were very different. But one of those opportunities to do that you had asked about is, hey, what's the deal with, ketamine and MDMA and some of those sorts of medicines? And there's a lot of these different, medicines that get put into the category of psychedelic just meaning like soul opening or mind manifesting. There's a famous LSD researcher named Dr. Stan Grof that is quoted as having said that what the microscope was for biology and what the telescope was for astronomy, psychedelics will be for psychology. It's a tool to be used to explore your own interior life and world and understand at an individual and on like a population level what it means to be human. Is what the opportunity that's being extended to us by these whole host of tools. You listed a whole bunch of them there: ketamine, MDMA, psilocybin, mescaline, LSD, ibogaine, the DMT family of different things. Hell, there's psychedelic fish out there. Like, this stuff grows in the dirt. This stuff grows in the water.
Toads.
Right? It's on amphibians and animals. Like, it's everywhere.
I don't even know how people find this stuff, but,
supposedly you could release a little bit of it from your, pineal gland under certain breathwork circumstances. Like, they tried making this stuff illegal and you make it in between your own ears. It's really hard to pull off, and we're getting the opportunity to kind of repeal some of those very mistaken war on drugs era, Nixon era legislation that prevented a whole lot of human flourishing and purveyed a great deal of harm on society, for sure. But what I think is helpful to explain in terms of what you'd asked about, kind of this gateway and what's a useful way to start to engage in psychedelic-assisted therapy for somebody who's just dipping their toe in it. There was a survey that was done in the late 2000 teens among U.S. adults saying that 8 out of 10 adults in America have not tried psychedelics but are curious about them. And that was kind of some of the inspiration for why I decided to write The Anti-Hero's Journey the way that I wrote it. Was, if you've never done a psychedelic and you want to read a book that will simulate that for you a little bit, you could try this, and then you don't have to do anything illegal. You don't have to ingest something. Like, once you put that stuff in you, you bought your ticket. Now you're going to ride your ride. But if you start feeling you can take the book and chuck it in the corner. You can set it down. You start feeling something you don't want to feel. You get to take a knee or whatever. It's an easy way to get into it. But the recommendations from folks who have a lot of experience with both the research and the use of these medicines is that there are some that are more, the way I like to break it out is either contracting medicines or expansive medicines. The contracting medicines are medicines that help you to move into your interior world, your life, your memories, your emotions, your experiences in a way that allows you to make greater sense out of them. The same way that good therapy should be able to allow you to feel safe enough to revisit the big bad stuff, the deep dark stuff, the most traumatic or morally injurious experiences that you've had. And you need to do a certain amount of that contracting interior work in order to build a platform for yourself to then be able to navigate the more expansive medicines, the stuff that's going to show you not just your own personal history, but cosmic history, or what's the meaning of all of this rather than just what's the meaning of me being here or of that particular event or what have you. So where you hear about quote unquote bad trips with some of these might just be somebody taking a very expansive medicine prior to having the platform built through contracting medicines to allow them to expand out in a way that's not destabilizing, because expansion is what an explosive does, right? If you expand too rapidly, it could feel like you're being pulled apart rather than like you're growing. And that's the risk of jumping to some of the the bigger medicines on the list, or the longer days like you were describing, ibogaine, or the classic psychedelics like higher dose psilocybin or LSD. What ketamine and MDMA then offer to people is the opportunity to build that platform and do some of that interior work. Ketamine and MDMA both being relatively shorter acting medicines. A ketamine experience might be 45 minutes to an hour long in a clinical setting. An MDMA experience in the clinical trials is anywhere from 3 to 9 hours long, and that can be with multiple dosing depending on the protocol that's being used there. And those wind up being more dreamlike experiences where people can approach memories from a place of compassion and curiosity and courage rather than overwhelm and being triggered and re-traumatized. And you get the opportunity to kind of relocate those memories for yourself in your own autobiographical narrative. And then once you've got that narrative buttoned up a little bit more tightly for yourself, then you get the opportunity to maybe quote unquote graduate or upgrade to some of the other medicines that you've mentioned there that can be a lot more both physically and spiritually intensive for somebody. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've never heard it put like that, with contractual versus expansive medicine. And for some reason, I've always told people, ketamine's, pretty available. It's pretty much legal. It's not covered by insurance like it should be right now. But I think it's a great tool for people that are struggling to get started. And I've always coached people, said, look, they say, well, I don't want to have a bad trip. I'm like, well, dude, bad trips are based on bad experiences and bad memories. And until you process them, you're gonna have bad trips. There's just, but even bad trips are bad, but they're on the other side of them, they are so worth the journey because of the experience of dealing with stuff that you've repressed, that you've never thought about, you don't want to think about. But you talk about your book, chucking it in the corner, right? You talk about therapy. Hey, when you tell your shrink, I don't want to talk about that no more. If you're in ketamine or you're on an MDMA, you don't have that option. It's like a video game. It's playing. It's going to roll, and that medicine takes you where you need to go, whether you like it or not. But even the bad trips are so powerful. Actually, they're the most powerful experience, I think, for a lot of people, because they're going places where they haven't been for a long time, or they forgot about it, right? And purposely, right? So anyways, I mean, there's a lot there that you just stated that I think should get people excited, because, there's so many people that want to try this, that try it. And of course, the legality of it on one hand, the availability on the other, the insurance coverage are all major obstacles right now to what I think is some of the most profound implications for implications for the psychiatry and the psychology arena, because you've got to get people to open up, and they're so that I mean, our egos are tough, man. We don't want to open up, man. So I think a lot of what you just said really unpacks a lot of that.
Yeah,
And
I no, go ahead.
no, you good. I mean, it's good. Yeah, I mean, I just want to get your comments on that, because people are like, well, I don't want to have a bad trip. Or they think that they're recreational drugs. Like, look, these things are work, bro. You can get a shovel and dig a trench. You're not going to work as hard as you are under the influence of these medicines.
Yeah, for sure. The bad trip phenomenon varies from, I think, person to person. A lot of the time it
Right.
winds up being somebody, passed somebody else something in high school study hall and they didn't know what it was and they took it and then they're just having a bad time or whatever, right? Like, sure, that would
Yeah.
be a bad time no matter what. The set and the setting is, kind of, it matters who you're with and what, mindset you enter these non-ordinary states of consciousness with. But to your point that sometimes the quote unquote bad trips wind up being incredibly meaningful on the other side of them, that's a big deal in the approach to this therapy. Dr. Viktor Frankl was an Auschwitz survivor who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, and kind of one of the bedrock statements that he makes in there is that all suffering ceases to be suffering as soon as it finds a meaning. And it's that moral injury that dislocates our capacity to make meaning out of the suffering that psychedelics particularly wind up helping people to reduce that dislocation and be able to start to make meaning again, even out of some of the things that seem the most senseless and the most meaningless in the first place. And a bad trip, unfortunately, can be a way that you can start to do some of that sort of stuff, is making meaning out of why this thing went that particular way, or why was that so difficult, or what have you.
Let's
And you find tools, whatever you figured out how to navigate through that bad trip winds up being something you can go back to over and over again whenever life itself starts to feel like a bad trip.
Absolutely. And then you understand on the other side that maybe it wasn't that bad. I mean, I survived it, right? Now I can process it. I can deal with it. Was it
Yeah.
really that bad? I can't believe I haven't thought about that in 35 years, whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Let's
I'm
talk
still
about,
here.
yeah, I'm still here, right? I made it. I survived. I mean, but let's talk about the other aspect is, because the side that we just talked about when it comes to the substance of this subject of this podcast, repetitive brain trauma and the impact of brains, is actually a perk. All right. It's like spiritual growth and all that is actually a perk for some of these medicines when they're prescribed for their impact on the physiology of the brain itself. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit, because I do believe that, and in my own personal case, I had a mental breakdown about 3.5 years ago, and it was just due to all the trauma that my brain had taken, 21 years in the Army, and semi-pro rugby. Just too much, right? Self-inflicted wounds, all 9 yards, right? Shot in the face, yada, yada. So but through this therapy, I've also noticed that all those symptoms, whether it's memory, whether it's the electrical crackling in my head, all that gone away. And when I'm done with ketamine or any of these, my brain felt like it ran a marathon. Can you talk about how this impacts healing, neuroplasticity, and some of the, more physical aspects of brain? Because, I mean, for a lot of guys that have to take this, and women, this is a 1-2 punch, right? You get the brain healing and you get the whole, the spiritual upload, that whole increase in spirituality and personal growth.
Yeah, exactly. I think, that's well said. And kind of the pivotal point that research has recognized as occurring with all of these different substances is this, what they call a neuroplastic window, which is just a fancy way of saying that you're growing new brain cells in important locations where you may have lost density before. Whether that be from repetitive head injuries accumulating over time, a particular event like, did you say being shot in the face, yada, yada, yada? So,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
no big deal, just shot in the
yeah,
face.
no,
Moving
but
on.
this is just one of the many impacts I've been took. I was in training, it was bullet shrapnel, but
Sure.
No fun.
Yeah, no, hard pass. If I can dodge that one, I will, right?
I just want to know who shot the sergeant major. All the medics are holding me down. They're all fighting over who's gonna patch me up. I'm like, get off me! Who shot me?
Who shot me?
Who's the fucker that shot me? That's all I wanted to know. Sorry.
No worries. Yeah, like just blow. I didn't want to just blow past yada 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 after getting shot in the face.
That could have been part of my problem,
right? Whichever event winds up creating this, even under chronic stress conditions, without explosions, without head injuries, without contact sports, chronic stress associated with anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress and moral injury, we can see on brain scans the loss of density in important places related to executive function in the cerebral cortex and related to memory in the hippocampus. We know that humans will lose synaptic density in those places, and through these various medicines, ketamine being the one that is rapid acting in that regard, there is an upregulation of different things like brain-derived neurotrophic factors, which are all just sort of miracle grow for brain. Like the way that your brain grew very rapidly when you were a fetus or whenever you were in the first 10 years of life, we're reopening a new window there where a lot of these things are upregulated in a way that is difficult to do any other way. So that at the biological level, you're getting back synaptic density, and more brain winds up being more function, more health, more ability to remember, more ability to self-regulate whenever overwhelming emotions would normally actually overwhelm us, the ability to have a brake pedal on your anger, the ability to recognize whenever you're feeling afraid or anxious and being able to engage in, behaviors that allow you to curb that sort of thing rather than losing control and having a panic attack or flying into a rage. You get that opportunity back because you've got the neurons available to use to do that. It's one of the Hebb's axioms is that neurons that fire together wire together. So you get these new neurons that you get to try to apply meaningfully in building new habits and ways of being so that you are more patient, more kind, more compassionate, more humorous in the face of the sorts of things where you might have been a real asshole instead. You get that opportunity back, right? That's just the biology. There's this neuroplasticity taking place. Then there's also like the psycho-spiritual component, the psychology and the spirituality that you mentioned, where while that's happening, while our brain is growing a whole bunch of these new neurons, we wind up having these really wild dreams about who we are, where we came from, connecting with angels and ancestors and the source of all life and gods and demons and heavens and hells and all sorts of things are taking place for whatever reason. And those also wind up being some of the most meaningful experiences that somebody can have that you can tuck away and use for later in, again, reshaping and reforming the person that you are into the person that you desire to be, the most whole, the most healthy, the most high functioning level that you're able to attain. You get that window of opportunity to change it. There's a leading researcher in the area called, his name's Robin Carhart Harris, and he wrote a paper a few years ago about a theory that he calls rebus, the relaxed beliefs under psychedelics, that people who may hold to very strong beliefs about any given particular thing, even if those beliefs aren't very healthy or functional, like whatever it might be, like very racist beliefs or self-defeating beliefs, I'm useless, I'm worthless. There's a relaxation of all of the belief structures that you have in place, so you get the opportunity to reevaluate, am I actually worthless, or is that just some bullshit my parents laid on me because they were going through some stuff at the time? And maybe I could decide to see myself differently going forward. It's a bit like if you had a ski hill that has a whole bunch of tracks worn into it and it gets frosted over and there's not a whole lot of fresh snow. You got to ride through the tracks that have already been worn. The grooves that are in your brain wind up being the kind of repetitive thoughtless thoughts that you have about, yeah, nothing goes right for me. Yeah, I'm a loser. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is how this shit always goes. Yeah, oh, this is just the first bad news. All of those sorts of ways that we beat up on ourselves and just add insult to injury. It's like psychedelics are fresh snow on that hill. The whole thing gets a fresh layer of powder, and you get the opportunity to carve some new routes down the hill for yourself in a way that is very difficult to accomplish in such a short period of time otherwise. Good therapy does that. There's a whole bunch of things that do that, but it takes a lot longer, and you don't have the neuroplasticity at the level that you do on psychedelic medicines.
And Doc, I think you just encapsulated the whole argument for using psychedelics right there. I mean, and folks need to understand this. Is like, oh my gosh, like you just that analogy with new snow. I mean, the way it's it's just beautiful, all right, because the problem that we have with repetitive blast exposure, repetitive impact, is that we do have lower synaptic density. Right, we do have blood-brain barrier penetration. We do have demyelination, dysmyelination, and it all needs to be healed. And the only way to heal it, it's not like you can stop, running and heal your leg. You still got to use your brain every day, but you're using a damage. The only way to put new components in it is to create growth. And so if we could, I mean, we're using ketamine right now for suicidal ideation, mental health problems. I mean, and we're not prescribing it. We're prescribing it because of mental health issues. We're not prescribing it because we know we have a damaged brain and we want to grow the brain. We want to repair the brain. I think that opens up a whole nother window on, the use cases of ketamine. Because right now, every time we've written a grant or we've tried to get, like we're providing free ketamine assisted therapy right now in Florida for 100 veterans, right? We got a grant
Wow,
from the state, 50 or
that's
100.
awesome.
Yeah. And we're trying to collect the data, more data in order to support, going back for more money. And this is why. And so I think, and one of the problems is with how do you measure the only way you can measure the amount of new brain material new is through clinical assessments afterwards, which are not exactly finite, but they give the idea that, hey, my brain's better, and that's what we're trying to get people to understand. But if we could get ketamine and MDMA and these other psychedelics used for just that reason, just to repair the brain, and like I say, the reason we send them there, that's a perk. You can become a better man, a better woman. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's awesome, man. But my brain's healthy, right? That's all you
yeah,
care
yeah,
about. It's
yeah,
like, stop, will you please fix this? I mean, my mental health is coming from this damaged organ. And if we can repair that, oh my God, my mental illness went away. But I've
for
got
sure.
spirituality. I feel better about I got my self-esteem. I got whatever, right? It comes out of these things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
all, I have yet to encounter anybody that's come out of psychedelic therapy and felt worse. I mean, it might have felt
right.
worse about a bad trip, but as on a person on a journey, they're all trending upwards. So I just don't understand a lot of the obstacles. Where are we at right now? I know you want to say something, but if we could after that talk about, what are the impediments right now to really making this an available, therapy? I mean, yeah, the drug ketamine costs pennies, right? It doesn't cost hardly anything for the drug. But when you look at the business model of, that's why it's $400 or $500 a session, but it's absolutely worth it if we could, get people on this path, willingly.
Yeah, ketamine itself as a medicine's dirt cheap, but it winds up being, maintaining an operation it's overhead costs that wind up getting put into making it as expensive as it is,
Yeah.
especially since, it's off-label use of an anesthesia medicine. So you're not going to find too many major payers that are going to shell out for insurance in that way for whatever reason. There's a friend of mine runs the ketamine task force, and they've done a bunch of I've attempted to do advocacy in the payer space to try to get payers on board with that. And that's the answer that they get over and over again is it's off label. So we're not going to mess around with that. But you had asked about also MDMA, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention at least some of the unique ways that it winds up working. I don't know if you've had the chance to talk to Rachel Yehuda. Would be a great guest to have on your podcast. She's running the Bronx VA is doing the MDMA for veteran clinical trials that MAPS has put together after the FDA asked for further data around medicalization of MDMA. They wanted more phase 3 clinical trials, and she's running those out of the Bronx VA, and she's an awesome physician. I think she's been in the VA system as a psychiatrist for over 30 years and just a super brilliant lady. But MDMA winds up working uniquely among the psychedelics as well. And one of the main things that it does is, it's affecting dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, which are all targets for antidepressive, anti-anxiety therapies. But it also upregulates oxytocin, which is something nothing else is really doing. And oxytocin is like a pair bonding neurohormone in human beings. It's a very high during the first 10 years of a child's life, and there's kind of a spike on into the teens, and it's about moms and babies have high oxytocin and bond well, so that a baby's pretty much useless if we're speaking functionally from a societal perspective. If we're going to keep those things alive, someone who's already a part of society is going to have to be in love with it to put up with all of its bullshit for the first 10 years or whatever, whenever it's around. And that's what oxytocin does, is it bonds tightly moms and dads to their little kiddos there. And then after you're and then pair bonding among like age mates. So like teenagers who, we're gonna be best friends forever. That sort of, your high school teammates or whatever, who you get tight with. And back whenever we were sort of hunter gatherers, that was useful because the younger age set was like the junior warriors that had to go out and hunt and go to battle together. It served that function. After that, as an adult, it's pretty much doesn't show up. It's kind of gone. Post orgasm, there's a little bump, and that's about it. And then it goes back to baseline there. But MDMA will send oxytocin levels back up through the roof, like whenever you were a baby or a teenager, to those kinds of levels, which gives you the opportunity again to feel a level of corrective closeness to yourself a lot of the time, so that you can feel, essentially, to oversimplify the way that it works in the brain, is it makes fear circuitry suppressed. Fear goes quiet, and then it turns up love and connection circuitry to 11, and you just feel like love overcomes fear in your own experience for a window of time there. And then you can do whatever therapeutic work you need to do around, why were my parents rough on me when I was younger, or why did this horrible accident have to happen, or whatever the case, or whatever you saw in combat trauma, whatever that might be. You can revisit those things without being afraid, and you can be courageous and loving. And it's genuinely hard to have a bad time on MDMA. For the most part, everything kind of tastes like gummy bears, and the world is just a Van Gogh painting. And you're just enjoying everything for a window of time there. And you get, again, the neuroplastic benefits and the opportunity to just sort of reconnect with yourself and everyone else connected to yourself from sort of the best version of you, neurobiologically and emotionally. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. MDMA is one of those substances that you really can't blame people for taking it recreationally, right? Because they just
Right.
feel great, right? And
Yeah.
it's kind of rough, the fact that they've got it, with all its effects, that it's kind of, it's a Schedule 1 drug right now. And
Correct. Yeah, that alcohol and cigarettes you can get, over the counter within limits, and that you can't. Some of these other things is just an absolute, civics class level tragedy that should be corrected yesterday, in my opinion. But it takes time to steer the Titanic in a different direction, apparently, especially after it hits the iceberg. But anyway.
To your point, I mean, it's it's kind of funny. Ibogaine's a class 1 drug, yet Ibogaine, you take it once, you don't want any more drugs forever. So why,
including Ibogaine, right?
Yeah. Ibogaine, so why is it a class 1 drug? Right?
Yeah.
It should be like, it should be in every clinic in this country for suicide, alcohol, all the addiction problems, and then MDMA to process that, because Ibogaine doesn't solve anything other than the addiction crisis. You still got to deal with your problems, and things like MDMA can absolutely help. And so where are we at right now on the the spectrum of that being something. I know the FDA shut it down for some reason, probably because pharma couldn't make enough money. I'll get off my conspiracy soapbox there, but I mean,
being a conspiracy theorist is just being early to being right anymore. That's all that seems like to me.
Just looking at it, just looking at the big picture. Yeah.
There's essentially 3 paths to access in the United States. There's obviously, you can go somewhere where it's legal, right? Which is what we see examples of, like the In Waves of and War documentary on Netflix about the group guys going down to Mexico to some clinics down there. I know you had Trevor Millar on recently, and he's involved in those sorts of things, and that's great. If you can afford it and have the opportunity to go someplace where it's legal, that's great. Not everybody can do that. For those who can't do that, there's kind of 3 routes that we're pushing on to try to get access for people. The first is just called decriminalization, which is not the same thing as legalization, but there are certain cities and even states that have looked at, essentially, we're not going to use any of our law enforcement or none of our law enforcement resources are going to be put towards pursuing charges against people for these particular things. So where you might get rolled up for growing or keeping psychedelic mushrooms in your house, now in the city of Denver, they're just not even interested in looking at trying to find that they got bigger fish to fry. So it's not legal per se, but essentially the agreement at that level of governance is we're not going to charge people for this any longer, is one route. So you can live somewhere or visit somewhere where they're just not going to enforce those laws anymore, so they say. And then there's the medicalization route, which is what we've kind of tap danced around a bit with, like the phase 3 trials for MDMA with the FDA, is that it's rescheduling. Like you said, these are listed as Schedule 1 medicines right now, which is supposedly something that has no medical use and is only potentially harmful, and getting that scheduled to a Schedule 2 or a Schedule 3 medicine. So for example, Schedule 2 medicines would be ADHD meds that are stimulants like Adderall or Ritalin, or opioid pain medicines are Schedule 2 meds, where there's a certain level of government and medical oversight and a lot of requirements in terms of education to be allowed to prescribe those medicines in the first place. But once you get there, then you can go see one of those legal prescribers to get them. Ketamine is a Schedule 3 medicine. Testosterone replacement therapy is a Schedule 3 medicine. So trying to get some of these medicines rescheduled to Schedule 2, Schedule 3, what have you, to where they could be prescribed is the medicalization route. And then there's the full legalization route, where it's not just not illegal, or it's you need a prescription to do this. It's it grows in the dirt, and nobody's going to stop you from growing it in the dirt if you wanted to grow it in the dirt in some of these instances. So those are the 3 kind of levers that we have the opportunity to try to pull on to change the laws of the land around. And different states are looking at doing this different ways. I saw where even just earlier this month, the state of Georgia is getting on board with, there's a bill in committee to look at legalization and medicalization routes there. There's a ton of different states out there. A really good organization run by a fellow named Josh Hardman is called Psychedelic Alpha. And if you want to go to Psychedelic Alpha's website, they do a good job of keeping up with the current research molecules and what stage of research they're in. So where's psilocybin in the chain of FDA rescheduling for like Compass Pathways molecule for psilocybin for depression, for treatment-resistant depression. You can get up-to-the-date info on that. And they also do a good job of keeping track of what legislation different states are looking at trying to pass. So in Oregon and Colorado, now there's been legislation passed where you can go to licensed facilitation centers and receive psilocybin-assisted therapy in one of those centers, in one of those places. So that's an example of kind of the legalization route with a level of oversight that's been put in place by those states that allows people to then pursue psychedelic assisted therapy in a decent container, not like a full on, libertarian live free or die approach to some of this sort of stuff like there might have been once upon a time. But that's the state of affairs as I understand it in the United States at this point.
Okay. And that's important to note because right now, I mean, as you said, I mean, it's still out of pocket. All these things that can help people are out of pocket. And that's what we're trying to change. And that's where the legislation comes in. I think that's where veterans can kind of set, you know, eh, the veterans just have a lot more moral support right now, than, all mental health people, they're all lying or whatever, right? I mean, we have a mental health crisis here and how we deal with it, how we treat it, how we recognize it. And to your point early in the conversation, the stigma about being mentally ill and reaching out for help is still the largest problem with our veteran community. But there's a lot of support there where veterans can lead the way in bills that can then become good legislation with some thought behind it. And I think everything we're talking about here makes perfect sense. But we're fighting entrenched bureaucracies, we're fighting power, we're fighting the fear of not getting elected. I don't even know. There's just a lot of things against it. But no matter what those obstacles are, they are reducing over time. It is being more effective. And as we open up as a society and start understanding that we do have to open up, we do have to, be able to confront our fears that mental illness is not a lifetime of drugs and therapy, which is what everybody believes. If you're mental illness, I mean, I was sucking my thumb and literally crying in my bed 3.5 years ago, but not knowing what the hell's wrong with me. And I am like, oh, I'm better than I've ever been. Mental illness can be diminished, it can be cured, it can be released, but it's not done through just drugs and therapy, which is what we look at mental illness as a lifetime condition. It's bullshit. And it pisses me off when we have medicines like this, and I will call them medicines. A lot of these came from the Lord, right? God built these things and he built the people that created them. So in my perspective, this is a gift from the Lord that needs to be, released, right? For lack of a better term. And it's people that like you that are doing it. I really, really appreciate it. As we close, Ben, tell us go ahead. Go for it.
I'd be remiss. I forgot to mention, and you pointed it out brilliantly right there. The fourth way to get access is the religious or the ceremonial route. There are churches that treat these plants as sacraments, and by joining those organizations under the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, it's a protected activity. So participation in communities like ayahuasca churches, you had my friend Wiz Buckley on. He started the Sacred Warrior Foundation and the No Fallen Heroes Foundation and some of those sorts of things where there are, religious traditions that use these as sacraments. And that's another way that you can legally get access to them. Didn't want to leave that out.
That's still going to cost you some big bones to do them too, but still it is a way, and it is worth to me, your mental health is worth the investment, and we'll do everything we can to support people. But you're right. I heard that they just opened an Iboga church in California. So that'd be interesting.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So instead of ibogaine, they're actually doing the plant itself instead of the extract, I think. So still trying to check in on that. But you're doing remarkable research, remarkable work. And what I'd like to do as we close out is please tell our audience what's next for Ben Askins. What do you got going on right now? How can people find you if they have questions? And so go for it.
Yeah, if you want to find me, I'm on, all the random social media stuff from time to time when I have a little bit of downtime. I think it's a cesspool for the most part, but every once in a while I'll check in with my friends out there.
I know, right?
Yeah. I think you guys found me on LinkedIn. So I spend some time on LinkedIn from time to time. I have a website, antiheroesjourney.com. That's kind of my author page. You can get, whatever books I'm working on. I'd like to cook up a few more books if I get the time. And then I work as a physician associate for a group called Pillars Health. You can go to pillars.health to get more info on, that particular approach to We try to do chronic disease prevention rather than chronic disease treatment. Instead of waiting for you to get sick, let's just prevent you from being sick for as long as we
Amen.
possibly can, is how we approach a lot of that stuff. I do a little bit of consulting and coaching on the side. I have a handful of athletes and execs and some of those sorts of folks that find my particular brand of perceiving the world valuable and meaningful. So you're welcome to reach out to me and see if we might get in sync with each other. But honestly, most of my time right now is spent just being a dad. I got 3 teenagers and an 11-year-old at home that I just love the heck out of. So as much as I can spend time with them, that's how I spend my time.
Ben,
sure.
thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate
My pleasure.
it. Man. What a
Thank you for the
marvelous
invite.
conversation, man. I know our audience is going to greatly appreciate it. As we close out, folks, another great episode of Broken Brains. Really appreciate you bringing here. Don't forget, go to the website. I just rewrote the book. It'll be published by the end of next month. We're going to have it in Spanish. We're going to have an audio book. So get it all out there. If you like the podcast, please share it. Let people know you like it. Get other people to come on, and because we want to support folks like Ben. Go find his podcast as well. Get out there and learn about this stuff because it's so important. We'll be announcing the dates for the 3rd International Summit on Repetitive Brain Trauma here in September this year in Tampa. Ben will get you on the invite list. And we just encourage you to learn about this. And please, protect your kids. Your kids only got one melon. You just heard a lot about why we have to protect it here. So please protect it. Take care of them. Until next time on Broken Brains, God bless you all. And we'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.